Hey guys, this is Katie from Moonflower Moments. Thank y'all so much for joining me today. Y'all are gonna have to excuse like the scratches that are on my hand. I know they're not pretty, but I've been moving cacti like back and forth, in and out and in and out in anticipation of the snow. We did get 10 inches, so I guess it wasn't for nothing. And I saw single digit temperatures for the first time in my life. It got down to 3 degrees last night. So anyway, I just wanted to give a little preface about that. So what we're here to do today is to do a video response to Simply Hand's embodied tarot tag. If you are not following Simply Hand, go do that right now. So if you love content that is practice-based and is coming from a deeply empathetic and reflective and really thoughtful person, please go check out Simply Hand's channel. It's one of my favorite ones that I found this year, or rather last year. I'm still thinking in terms of 2024. Is like, are other people still doing that? Like, we're a month in, but it is what it is. So I'm going to leave a link down below to her original video as well as other people who have responded to this tag that I really liked. So to get into the meat and the potatoes of it, essentially Simply Hand is in the midst of doing a very big chakra study. And so what she did is she came up with a prompt where you pick decks to represent each of the chakras, and then you pulled a card for each of them from the decks that you had selected to kind of check in with yourself energetically to say, hey, how am I feeling? And so I really love this setup so much because one, we're combining two systems. Y'all know I love to combine systems, but we're also showing tarot in practice. So those are the two main reasons. But then the third main reason is, oh my goodness, I thought to myself, wait, I feel like I've done this before. And then I went back to go look at one of my old Oracle decks and kind of like sifted through the guidebook. And I was like, wait, this was one of the first spreads that I ever did. So before I did like a Celtic cross or anything, I was using this book to kind of dip my toes into spreads. So this is for Enchanted Blossoms, which is the first Oracle deck that I ever owned. And here's a card if you want to see what it looks like, just in case you've seen it before and you want it to jog your memory. And in this book, they actually have something similar, a chakra alignment spread. And so this is one that I used a lot when I first started reading. I just found it to be very like succinct, and it gave me all the information that I needed to help put me in a place of balance, which is something I really needed when I first found tarot. So what I'm going to do is actually combine Simply Hand's like prompts and kind of guide words, because she did it kind of in a way that like she had affirmations for each of the chakras as well as what this book says. And I'll keep this book displayed as best as I can throughout this process so that we kind of know like what prompts I'm working off of. So I actually picked two different decks for each chakra. And the reason that I decided to do this, and I'm going to show you both, and then I'm going to pull cards from both and do a little bit of a check-in with myself on camera, like a little bit of a live reading. Hopefully it's not too vulnerable, but you know it probably will be. The reason I picked two is because I love to use two different tarot decks in my reading all the time. I very rarely sit down and use one. I will use two. Some of the pairs I picked are like tarot and oracle. Some are oracle and oracle, but the majority are tarot and tarot. So I figured this was another way for me to give you like an authentic look into my practice and how I interpret cards side by side. Okay guys, so that was a bit of a very long-winded intro. I think I've refilmed this like 6 times to try to make it as concise as possible. I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Let me go ahead and scoot that over. Okay, cool, so we have that here. So the affirmation that Simply handpicked first is the root chakra, I am grounded. And I really like that. I felt like this was basically saying the same thing in the book, your base survival, your connection to the earth, your grounding. So I thought to myself, like, what is a deck that helps me stay rooted, stay grounded? And of course I picked the Mushroom Tarot. Y'all know here that I love mushrooms just as much as I love Lepidoptera. I think I got my start into loving mushrooms through The Enchanted Life. I'll leave a link in the description box below to that one. And if you're someone who like really sees nature as a form of spirituality, that is a book that deeply taught me that spirituality existed. I think I was a bit of an atheist. I wouldn't even say agnostic. Like I think I was a bit of an atheist before I found that book. Then I was like, whoa, there's something so deeper than just myself. It really kind of was like an ego death and reawakening all in one kind of go. But essentially, I have fond memories of reading that book that make me incredibly fond of mushrooms. So the concept, when I think about like mushrooms, I think of course of the concept of mycelium. I know I talk about that a lot on my channel, but just the idea that mushrooms exist underneath the ground, and there's always this firm web of information that's being handed between one mycelium web to the other. Different mushroom species will talk to each other through the webs. Trees will talk to each other through the webs. And I think, of course, mushrooms are associated with the soil that's underneath our feet. And so I figured that this was a perfect example of a root chakra deck. And it ultimately is one that I use quite frequently to remind me to kind of sunbathe and kind of earth bathe. Like, one of my favorite things to do during the summer and during the winter is to literally lay on the ground. And my soil tends to be a little bit wet. I do live in South Louisiana, right? So it is definitely wet, and it definitely rains all the time. And there oftentimes are mushrooms. It doesn't matter what season there are. Like, there are probably going to be mushrooms outside. But I love to feel myself into the dirt. So this is definitely a grounding kind of root chakra deck for me. And it's the base of that to me. So taking one step further, and I'll leave this out because we are going to pull from it in just a minute. If we're talking about the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot representing the mushrooms, the soil, the decaying matter underneath, of course, all of that gives birth to life. And so I am going to pick the Animal and Botanical Tarot to represent my other. We're going to move that right there. There we go. My other root chakra deck. So I think once Entangled Life opened up my eyes to the mushrooms and everything that was going on underneath me, and how I'm connected to that on not only a practical level as a part of this world, but as also on a spiritual level, I think it also opened up my eyes a little bit further to interacting with plants and animals. And I got into butterfly raising, which is something that I still do. I no longer do it inside anymore because I've kind of learned the problems of that, but I do it outside. But I think when I'm feeling the need to feel that groundedness, the first thing I do is go stick my feet in the soil. But then the next thing I do is, of course, as I'm laying there in the ground, like looking around and seeing what's around me. And I do know the plants pretty intimately in my yard. I know the native species of the different insects that are in my yard. I'm deeply embedded within the insect life. I know the critters, like this is an armadillo. We had a armadillo in my yard the other day. We also have groundhogs like crazy. That is so crazy. I said groundhog, and isn't this a groundhog? I did not mean for that to happen. Is this a groundhog? Okay. Somebody tell me if this is a groundhog. Okay, that's kind of crazy if that happened. But essentially, I have some of these animals in my yard. I don't have all of them because this deck is a pretty diverse representation of animal life. But I have enough to where when I look at this, I say, ooh, here we go. Here's an owl eye moth. I can think of one or two of those. So it's a way to help me feel that groundedness, is to remind me that I am one with everyone that is around me in terms of nature. And I think that's a pretty universal experience for most people. All right, so I'm going to pull one card from each, and then I'll do a little bit of reading, and then we'll just keep going. So the question I'll ask is essentially, how is my root chakra right now? Like a general energetic checkpoint. So I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to shuffle because I take forever to shuffle, and I don't want to edit that out. And then when I unpause it, the cards will be on the table. Okay, so from the Mushroom Hunter's Tarot, we got 7 of Cups, and then from the Animal and Botanical Tarot, we got Page of Pentacles. So I tend to kind of riff off these intuitively. I will play with a guidebook every once in a while, but I have read this guidebook pretty much start to finish. This one I have not read start to finish. I actually hate the guidebook for that. So I tend to prefer to work with this one more intuitively, because usually, even if I don't know what the mushroom is or what the main animal is, I can usually identify the insect or the invertebrate. So in the case with how my root chakra is going, what is the status of my root chakra? I pulled here the 7 of Cups. And this seems to be very powerful for me in terms of how it relates to the Page of Pentacles. So the Page of Pentacles to me is someone that is like the page, right? Like they like to get their hands dirty. They like to be in the dirt. They like to kind of play with these tangible resources. So this is a really beautiful thing for me to see, because I feel like I've been disconnected from the earth because of the fact we're in winter and we have snow and I can't go outside and garden. I don't want to be doing that. But this is just reminding me that I'm part of the nature cycles, and maybe it's normal for me to feel like I'm a Page of Pentacles right now because I can spend more time planning to do the kinds of things that ground me to the earth. Maybe right now I'm supposed to be making garden plans, and I'm supposed to be trying new seed germination techniques. Maybe that's where I need to be. And I can look right here and see for the snail that I can't rush time. I have to take the time to do what I need to do. But the snail moves at its own pace, which is where I need to be in terms of like the root chakra. I need to accept that there are going to be times where I feel like I'm the Queen of Pentacles and the King of Pentacles, and there's going to be times where I feel like I'm the Page of Pentacles, but I still have that Pentacles background. So in terms of brainstorming for the future, and for like future gardens, I think that's a large part of where the Seven of Cups is coming in from me. When I think of the Seven of Cups, I do tend to think of brainstorming, and I think that that's an appropriate thing because we have mushrooms here and we also have mushrooms here. This deck typically doesn't have mushrooms on every card, so it's kind of interesting that that came up with this. But what I'm seeing with the combination of the two is just an emphasis on embracing that decay and embracing that stillness of a period, recognizing that things are underground, and so therefore I need to be as well. This is actually really nice for my root chakra, I believe, because it's a reminder that I'm kind of like where I need to be in terms of that. Like if I don't feel grounded, I still am, even if I can't always see it. And it's part of kind of the cycle that I'll come back to it. And I can look forward to like future things with it too. And kind of like looking forward to the new emotional experiences. Okay, so this was Animal and Botanical Tarot, and this is the Mushroom Hunters Tarot. I do have a silent flip through of the Animal and Botanical Tarot on my channel if y'all want to see it, and it has the guidebook entries in there too. Okay, so the next chakra that I want to talk about is the Sacral Chakra. And the Sacral Chakra is based essentially in our genitals. And I really relate a lot to this one because it's related a lot to creativity. Essentially, I mean, that's what genitals do, is that they bring forth creation. So they generate, and I just realized that gen means born as a prefix. So that makes sense. Yeah, it's a creative energy, and it's where that creative energy is stored. So Simply Han had I feel for this one as the affirmation. This book says who you are as a human and the seed of your creative life force, the self. I think blending these two, I really am going to focus more on like the creative life force that kind of comes through. So if we see this as a bit of a spectrum, the Animal and Botanical Tarot, which was this one, it had all of these creatures as like individual creatures. I kind of thought about like, well, what happens when they get together? What happens when the plants reproduce? Like, what does that look like? Because to me, that's the basis of the Sacral Chakra, is like kind of the union and the birth that comes from that union. So I pulled Tarot of the Moon Garden, which I edged. Y'all, the edge job is bad. Don't judge it. Don't judge it. It makes me want to cry. But I do love this deck. I pulled this for my first sacral deck for similar reasons like what I had stated before. So if we have these creatures that are coming together, and these creatures are reproducing, and these animals are reproducing, and these mushrooms are reproducing, and these trees are reproducing, what do you get? You get a garden that is just completely maximalist. So I think that this is a physical representation of that birth, of that generation, of that what comes from that creative life force. But I think in itself, I use this deck in that exact way. So this is the deck that I use to plan for my spring gardens, which according to the reading I just did, maybe I should just go ahead and get on that, right? So because this is a deck that I use to help me tap into that creativity and to see where I can place plants and what are some things that I should focus on in the garden this year, because the garden is a living, breathing thing, right? It comes back every single year. This is a deck that represents that true jolt of creativity to me. It's just beautiful. So this was my first one that I have for the Sacral Chakra. And it's kind of like a blend. It goes from like Animal and Botanical to that. I'm kind of like thinking like ground up. Now the next one is not safe for work, like not safe for work at all. And YouTube, I'm not showing erotica. Please do not ban this video. I am showing tarot cards. Please do not ban this. But I'm giving y'all fair warning. There is lots of nudity in this one. So this is Femme Erotiques, which is an extremely cherished deck in my collection. I'd probably show it more if YouTube liked it. So this is a collection of vintage erotic photographs of women that has been made into a tarot. So I think that this is incredibly on the nose, right? But if we're talking about the animals that are mating in the Tarot of the Moon Garden and things coming from that, I think the natural thing for us to recognize too is that we also are animals. And so that is exactly where I am going with this in particular. And I think there's something really beautiful that can come from sex in particular, because this is kind of the area of the sacral energy. It's the area of the genitals. Of course, it's associated with sex because sex is generative. But I think sex in itself is an inherent power. And I think it's a way that we can tap into the creativity that's inside of us. I think there are many people who use sex as inspiration, especially sex as a creative kind of muse. And so I don't want to like get banned on YouTube for saying that, but that is where my mind went for this. And this is a deck that I use to help me set those creative intentions. So I pull one of these cards per month, and it's a very liberating process for me to do it. I pull one of these cards at the start of my menstrual cycle on the very first day when I feel the most powerful. I don't know if other women feel that way, but it's definitely the time where I feel most inherently linked with my own magic, is when my body is cleansing and going through that natural process of cleansing. And so this deck it's closely associated with like my own personal body in that kind of way. But I pull a card and I ask myself, what is something that I can create for the month? And I only pull one card. Usually I pull 40 cards. Like, I only pull one card out of this because I know that it's going to hit me kind of like a jolt of lightning. And I really need to take the time to appreciate what this deck is trying to tell me. This is the only time I really use this deck. I would use it for other stuff, but I just feel like it slots so nicely into my monthly readings for myself. That's when I use it. So anyway, it's a beautiful deck. I'll leave a link in the description box below to this one because it is indie and it's not one that I get to see very often. The cardstock is not fabulous at all, but I think it's worth it. All right, so once again, I'm going to pause the camera while I shuffle, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a check-in with myself on this one. Hopefully this one doesn't get too vulnerable because I think it could. All right, Tara's trying to make me cry. Oh, if I cry in a video, it's going to be because of this. Oops. I hit my camera with my nervous hands. There's so much to be said about this. So I'm going to interpret probably each individually, and then I'm going to explain my link between them. So in terms of my creative process, as I pulled this card, I asked myself, where am I in terms of my creativity, in terms of my wanting to generate content, in terms of wanting to generate ideas, and just the concept of generation. That was the word that really came through for me. And to receive the Ace of Cups is just so heartwarming because I really do try to make this creative space for me, this creative outlet, a place where people feel warm and welcome and seen and heard. That's really important for me. And when I think about my classroom, it's been a couple days since I've thought about it because, it's been like snow gammon. I haven't been in the classroom in a while. That is also another place for me that is deeply creative. And I spend a lot of time thinking of creative activities for my students to help them feel connected to themselves, to each other, to help them feel loved. And so this is a really beautiful thing because it's almost like the product of my creation as well as the spirit of my creation. So my tarot guides, like whoever you are up there, my spirit guides, like thank you for giving me this compliment because I don't want to sound too egotistical, but this is incredible. Yeah. Okay. All right, next we have the moon, so a turning in the journey. I totally think this is who I am and where I am right now. So I've always considered myself to not be creative. And a few years ago, I had a moment where I asked myself and I asked other people, hey, do you have to be creating content that is unique in order to be considered a creator? I just have a question about that, right? Because in terms of creativity, the word create is in the name. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be creating new things. Because for me, another outlet for my creativity is in the kitchen. I love to cook, but I always follow recipes, mostly because I cook a brand new food every single week. I hardly ever cook the same thing twice. And I had a lot of people answer me and tell me, no, you don't have to be creating unique content in order to be considered a creator. I'm still a creator in the kitchen, even if I'm just following a recipe. And so it's an interesting thing because this is in regards to my self-perception. This year, I am starting to recognize that I am a creator and I am creating some things that are kind of unique to me. It's part of my unique voice. And I'm doing that out of love, not only for myself, but also trying to make sure that I'm providing spaces for other people that are warm and safe. Hello, that's the Cancer in me. And so this is a turning point in the journey for me. And it's a call for me to embrace those shadows of the moon with the same love that I would give to other people who are facing the same thing. Great. I love that. Thank you. I do tell my cards thank you. That was a realistic portrayal of it. My husband, when I got that from my husband, he doesn't read tarot very often, but when he reads tarot to say thank you, he'll pull like a thank you card, and I don't really know what the purpose of the thank you card is, but he always has to pull a thank you card, I guess, to make whatever's on the other side feel like they're seen and to give them an opportunity to like give like a parting word. So it's almost like he kind of parts with his cards, and so I've kind of started to implement that as well. Okay, next. All right, so next one is going to be the solar plexus chakra. So according to this book, it's the place of your personal identity and who you are as a person, confidence. I actually prefer simply like Han's interpretation of this. She has two affirmations. She has, I have power and I do. You know the feeling when you're on like a swing set and you kind of feel, you go up and you're about to jump off the swing set? I feel like I always kind of have power like concentrated in this area, and I feel like that is that solar plexus. So for the I have power deck, the one that kind of helps me to tap into that like gut feeling, that feeling that I oftentimes get when I'm reading tarot too, is going to be my Wild Radiance Tarot. And I fucking love this deck. I really do. She's one of my top 10 favorite decks of all time. I love this deck, y'all. I think I'm meant to be a desert gal. I know for sure I'm definitely not meant to be a snow gal. It's way too damn cold outside. But I think I'm meant to be a desert gal. And when I think about this, and when I think about an I have power deck, this is the deck that comes to mind, because look at this woman, y'all. Look at this woman. Look at that ab strength. Look at that core strength. Look at that strength that's right here centered around her middle. She's very well balanced in this arena. There's a lot of like beautiful people that are sitting in their power. Look at this card. I think it's one of my favorite cards of all time. And like you can feel just the strength that these women have. To me, I feel like the solar plexus is kind of associated with the strength card. And I know I've said this before and I've shared this, but this card in particular changed my interpretation of strength, because when I pulled this card one day, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, she has a lot going on in her core. And then I thought to myself, our core values are what help us have that strength to determine what we want and what we don't want in life. And so it kind of took on a whole nother layer and a whole nother meaning. But this deck is one that when I use it, it makes me feel strong. This is a personal power deck for me. And I could wax poetic about it. You've heard me wax poetic about it. I love this deck. I love my decks, y'all. I hope y'all know that. Y'all probably know that if you're subscribed. And if you're not subscribed, like, no, I repeat a lot of decks because I love those decks. So before I get too silly, this is one of my solar plexus decks. The other one is probably not going to be a surprise either, even though I haven't shown it in a little while. It's going to be my Aztec Tarot, which has gorgeous, luscious, great cardstock. This is my favorite cardstock of all in my collection. Let me make sure I'm on camera. So if the Wild Radiance is my I have power, this has to be my I do. So this is a deck that is incredibly grounded and incredibly practical to me. It does have a voice of confidence to me. And that confidence comes from, I know my personal power, but I don't have to like show it off, right? Like if I am to embrace the gender spectrum, which I mean, I guess I do embrace the gender spectrum. I don't embrace the gender binary. I definitely embrace the gender spectrum. Let me clarify that. I feel like Wild Radiance is more of a wild kind of feminine deck. I have this power, where this deck comes off as more masculine on that side of the spectrum for me, in the sense of my power comes through my command. So it's less about kind of that movement that's present in the Wild Radiance, and this is more about like structure and organization. I guess what I'm trying to convey to you is like this is I am doing kind of deck, similar to the Emperor. So while the Wild Radiance is my Empress, this would be my Emperor. I think that's the language that I want to use to describe this. But this deck is deeply confident. This deck has a sense of personal identity. It definitely knows what it is. It definitely has a clear voice. And so it's going to be my solar plexus deck, my second one. And I love that. So once again, I'm going to pause, put up the cards, interpret, and keep on tracking. So I did take Simply Hands affirmations for this spread. ish, because I have two. This is I have power, and this is I do. And I think for the justice card, I'm getting a lot of different things here. So first and foremost, I see justice as someone who is objective, because I oftentimes imagine the two pillars, right, that are in the traditional justice card, and we have someone that's standing between the two pillars. So essentially you're someone who can see two different sides of the story, but you still stand in the middle, kind of objective to it. This in reference to myself is I feel like right now, because I'm taking a bit of a rest, quote unquote, I'm not doing as much tarot, I'm not filming as much content, I am, my class sizes were drastically reduced this spring. Like I feel like I'm in a good spot in terms of kind of stepping back some and kind of assessing and evaluating not only what I'm doing, but like who I am as a person. And I really need this kind of winter season, this kind of hibernation season in order to do that. So in terms of this justice card, I'm about to be on my Saturn return next year. I will be in my Saturn return. I'm coming up on it. And I really do see that I'm kind of in this space where I'm kind of in the middle here. And I am able to see the first 28 years of my life as very formative to my growth on one side, and then the rest of my life on the other side. And I know that I'm going to feel this multiple times. Like it's not going to be this binary. Once again, it's going to be kind of this spectrum, and there's going to be other pivotal points in my life too, but I do feel like I'm kind of at this turning point in that. But the reason that I'm able to have that personal power, which is associated with the chakra, is because I'm able to step back and see where I've come from and also where I'm going. And in terms of I do, we have the Two of Cups. And I really love this. I think I'm kind of merging two parts of myself together. I'm merging a lot of parts of myself together. But the Two of Cups to me is also about commitment. So I'm looking at myself and saying I commit to certain attributes that I used to have, but I also commit to attributes that I want to bring on. So in terms of the personal power and the doing, this is such a beautiful sign of commitment and moving forward. It also, of course, has the touch of romantic love. And I am able to get quite a lot done because of my husband. I mean, hell, like, y'all, he knows almost every deck in my collection. Like, come on, like that's like 100 decks. Like he can name probably with accuracy like 80 of them. And not only does he like know them, but he knows what I do with them. Like I'm blessed for that. I really am so blessed. And so I think like I have power because I'm in this position to where I can see these different things, but I do because I have the correct support, not only from my past and my future selves, but also from the loving relationship I'm in. So y'all need to do this spread. Seriously. Every time I do this spread, it's like this. Okay, so that was Wild Radiance and my Aztec Tarot, and that was my solar plexus chakra. I told y'all this was going to be a long one. Thank y'all for riding with me. Okay, so next is going to be the heart chakra, and this is the cradle of your kindness, compassion, and love healing. Simply Hand has I love. Great. I love that. So like I love. I mean, I feel like that makes sense. So for this prompt, I picked two decks that I always use side by side. The first one that I picked is a tarot deck. This is my Tarot of Light. Is that the name of this deck? Yeah, Tarot of Light. I think it used to be called Tarot of Love, but it's not called that anymore. Okay, so in terms of the Tarot of Light, this is a deck that fills me with absolute universal love. So I tend to be a very rosy-eyed person to begin with. I am incredibly optimistic. I always see the glass as half full, and when I'm not, I definitely need to book an appointment with my therapist, because I'm not trying to embrace like toxic positivity, but like I really in general am an optimistic person, and I know that's who I am to my core, and it's who I strive to be, and it's who I am always trying to be, because I know it's the truest part of who I am. And so this deck really speaks to this optimist part of myself that feels like the part that has that open heart. So I have done a whole video of tarot when my heart is open, which includes like openness to not only love, but also like sensitivity to betrayal, because when our heart is open, we are sometimes feeling betrayed because we're not receiving it. I'll leave a link in the description box below. If you love this kind of content, like go check that out, because that is totally very similar. But to get to the main point of this, I think that this is my deck that I turn to when my heart is open, because I know that my heart is open when I'm seeing things from an optimistic point of view, when I'm seeing people and really, I don't want to say idealizing them or romanticizing them. That's not what I do, but I give them the benefit of the doubt. and I try to treat them with kindness, and I try to like see beyond my own point of view. And this is a deck that does this, because this is 9 of Angels, this is 9 of Swords, and we have Guardian here. Like, I don't know, man, like, it's pretty light washed. And when my heart is open, that's how I feel, right? And it's not because I'm lying to myself and saying that the terrors that are keeping me up at night are, you know, my guardian angels trying to communicate. It's not like any of that kind of BS. It's a reminder that like you can be your own guardian, but if you can't be your own guardian, like you can reach out to other people who can be. And like, I don't know, like I know it's light washed and I know it's kind of crazy, but this is how it feels when my heart is open. It feels expansive. I'm able to see the 7 of Swords as not thievery and betrayal, but I'm able to see it as progress, because that's what the 7 is anyway. The 7 is a challenge that we must take on, and you know, the Swords deal with the mental realm. So this is my heart chakra deck. Hopefully y'all aren't judging me too bad, but it is. I love this deck. 7 of Stars as 7 of Wands, and we have faith. Yeah, we have the faith to get through it. I love this shit. So that was my first one. My next one is particularly, I think I picked it because, you know, I feel, but also as healing. This is going to be my Enchanted Blooms Oracle, which we have been looking at the guidebook for this the whole time. Guys, I got this deck when I needed it. My heart was very closed off when I lived in Alabama that one terrible year. I know that like y'all are probably tired of hearing it, but it's part of my story. It was the first time that I was ever away from home. My husband was working really long hours. It was our first year of marriage. Guys, it was tough, and it's something that I've processed and I've worked through myself, but I'm so thankful that I had this deck with me during that time period. This deck is the deck that reminded me that people are nice, right? Like that there's happiness around you and there's hope around you. You can be confident. You can assess joy. You can seek joy. And the way the guidebook is written, hopefully I don't mess this up too much, but like here's you can't see that, but it says appreciation. I don't want to move it to where you can see the whole thing because I have a whole setup here, but it has these questions. Who and what will I appreciate today? What is elegant in my life? How can I bring more elegance to my world? How can I be more generous with myself and others? What do I have to offer? These little questions that are in the guidebook for this deck, they're meant to make you appreciate what's around you. They're meant to make you more present. And to me, that's what the heart chakra is. It's about you being more present with what is around you and the universal love that is around you. I fucking love this deck. All right, so let's go. Heart chakra, let me go ahead and pause and I'll be right back. Alrighty guys, so we have the Awakening for Emergence and we have Wisdom with the purple iris and the common map. There was a moment in the summer that I hung out with 2 friends and I brought this deck with me and I pulled this card before that interaction, and from that interaction I think my heart chakra did open. So if my 2 friends are watching this, y'all know who you are and you know the experience I'm talking about. The rest of YouTube, just trust me, it was a heart-opening experience and I have to be able to keep it at that. So I know what this card is signifying to me. It's signifying to me the awakening, how much progress I've made in the last like 6 months. I used to be someone who was extremely avoidant to relationships, and I feel like this year I've just completely bust that wide open, right? Because that's the thing about attachment styles, is that they can change and they will change. And I think that this is the reminder that I did have that awakening, that I'm able to see that there's more and that I can kind of climb out of the water where I was kind of slowly self-drowning myself. And I have that wisdom, right? I think this also kind of touches on the fact that like I know myself. So the iris is an incredible spiritual symbol for me because there's so many of them in Louisiana. But in particular, the purple one is native. I don't think that this one is, like the one that's depicted, but Louisiana does have a native purple iris. And when I think about that, I think about the fact that irises exist both on land and water, which is why the Temperance card is my favorite card in all of tarot, because, you know, like we have 1 foot on water, 1 foot on land, but we also have irises in that. And so I think to myself that like I have 1 foot in this kind of watery canal of these relationships of I'm putting myself in that point of like, judgment is kind of a scary card, right? Because it's new, it's a calling, it's moving forward, but I have 1 foot in this kind of like watery, scary realm, but I also am wise enough to know myself, to know where those boundaries must exist and to keep that other foot on land. Okay, So we have the Enchanted Blooms right here. We also have Tarot of Light. I know she's light washed, y'all. Don't counter her out. She's a good hard deck, y'all. She really is. Okay, next one. Okay, next is going to be the throat chakra. Now, I know the throat is typically associated with Taurus, but I always think of the throat as associated with air signs, and I think it's because air is associated with speech for me. So I know that I'm making like a little bit of like my own kind of personal association here, but just trust me, like these are definitely both air decks for me. So the one that I want to pick for this one, and the affirmation from Simply Hand on this one is I speak. The first one I want to show is my Klimt Tarot. I have edged this one. See, look guys, it's a good edge job, not like my Tarot of the Moon Garden, but we won't speak about that. I probably need to cut off those borders. Okay, anyway, so here's Klimt. This one is my first throat chakra deck. So this is the one that I struggled with finding a second deck the most for, and I almost wasn't going to do it, but I like a little bit of symmetry. I'm a symmetry girl. This is actually one that my husband picked out. And his reasoning for picking this as a throat deck, and I think it totally makes sense, is this is expression in its highest form. And if we're talking about expression, we're talking about something that comes from like ourself, and it comes from, we have this unique point of view and this unique perspective that we want to speak and let others be privy to. And so it says the truth of who we are, and where that is housed, which is great because we have this house here. I love when tarot does this. I love the synchronicities. But it's this, he kind of gave me the reasoning of like, this is a form of expression for this particular artist, and art is essentially our way of expressing ourselves. It works for me, y'all. I can see where he's coming from. I also associate this a lot with the throat chakra. I think my husband's like very fond of this deck because he is a like double Gemini, and he has like a Libra moon. So he's triple Gemini. Like I think his chart is like 78% air. And he really associates this deck a lot with Gemini energy because it's so kind of sporadic and so kind of like quick. This is a deck that kind of like throws things at you, and it's kind of sharp and kind of pointy, kind of like a Gemini deck, but then it also kind of backs away. So there's kind of like multiple layers of interpretation that are going on here. I hope that you're following me as I go, or that like rather that I'm making sense as I'm speaking this, but it is my throat chakra deck. Y'all have a feeling this one isn't going to be so kind to me because I had the hardest time explaining that one. But I do love my Klimt Tarot. It's one of the most beautiful decks in my collection. The next one I picked immediately. This is going to be the crows. The crows, all they do is bitch at me in the most loving way. The crows caulk. All they want to do is talk to me. So I will literally be sitting at my desk and I'll be like, I'll hear a crow, like a literal crow, and then like also like a mental crow. But who's to say that mental is not literal? I mean, who knows? And I'll think to myself, I have to pull from the Crow Tarot. Okay? And so I'm like, all right, what do the crows have to tell me? I have the crows out on my desk right now. And I feel like this is a deck that it just fully embraces that throat chakra because the crows are so loud. They are going to tell you what they need to tell you. And when they tell it to you, they're going to expect you to receive that message. But it's kind of like that jolt of information, similar to what the Klimt gives you. It's that kind of like quick, whoop, here we go. And in a sense, I think that the crows have a very distinct voice that they use for their particular aims because crows are so intelligent. But this is a deck that I use to help me kind of tap into my own voice in terms of my ambitions and my goals. So it works for me. The crows are definitely a voice kind of deck. And I think MJ, like Colin, has like a specific voice too, and that's definitely present in this deck, similar to the Klimt Tarot. All right, so let's see. Okay. I guess I didn't have reason to worry. This one I was like, because I was like, am I describing this appropriately? Like maybe this is the chakra I need to work with the most because it's clearly the hardest one for me to describe. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a way more flattering than I thought it would be, or rather not flattering, but this is nice. This could have not been nice. So to get started, we have the Three of Cups. This is the one that came out first, and I think it's the one that I need to look at it. And I think that this, in combination with the sun, we have like this bright kind of colorful energy. We have these yellows that are really like impactful, but we also have this green here in the middle. And to me, green brings forth like new vitality and new life. It kind of reminds me of spring. So it's almost as if there is a new phase that is growing within me, where I feel like I can express myself more openly with other people. And in that speaking and in that expressing of my boundaries, but also my deep affection, because I think of the sun, I think of affection. I don't know why that's coming up. I'm just kind of reading intuitively here. With that, I'm able to nurture these relationships. And so it does seem like I'm doing a pretty good job with nurturing those communities. All right, throat chakra, good to see. All right, next we have the third eye chakra, and Simply Hand's word for this one is I see. According to this book, it is where we see and feel what is beyond our perceived world wisdom, aka intuition is the way that I'm taking it. So the first one that I wanted to pick for this one is Spirit Keeper's Tarot. And I think it's because of my definition of intuition. I'm going to do a whole series on this, so like let me know if you want to hear me like wax poetic about it even more. But to me, I think intuition is representative of two different sides of the spectrum. So we have a spectrum of intuition, so to speak. And I think one of the sides of the intuition spectrum for me is that I feel like intuition is kind of like a well, and we have to pull our information from somewhere. And the more we read and the more we study and the more we learn, the deeper our well is. And so therefore, when we sit down to read or we sit down to do any form of divination, we're able to pull these threads together because we have a deeper well of information to pull from. And so that's kind of like one definition of intuition for me. That's kind of my working definition of it and how it kind of pops up in life to me in terms of a like practical cognitive definition of intuition. And I think Bennabelle Wynn is just the archetype of this kind of intuition, this kind of logical intuition. So when I was first starting to learn tarot, I read Holistic Tarot start to finish. It was the first tarot book I ever read. And a friend of mine told me, if you want to read tarot, read this book. And I don't know, sometimes I literally think, y'all, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And so I feel like a large basis of who I am as a tarot reader came from Bennabelle Wynn and her instructions and her teaching and her information through Holistic Tarot. And in that, she pulls together so many different information sources. She pulls from so many different forms and kind of bases of not only tarot, but also of like the occult and magic. And that's also represented here in this deck of Spirit Keeper's Tarot. So for me, this is a deck that helps me to see beyond my perceived world because it's a deck that represents kind of the culmination of all of this knowledge around me and all of these different theologies that are around me. So this deck helps me to tap into something that is beyond myself in that way. So this is the first one. This definitely represents one side of that spectrum for me. The next one is going to be my first intuitive deck. I either bought this deck or William Blake first. I think I bought this one first, and it was my first true intuitive reader. So this is Mystical Dreams Tarot? Yeah, or Mystical Dream Tarot. And the creator created all of these images from her own dreams. So she kind of used the tarot system as a way to convey to other people the knowledge that her dreams had given her. And so I feel like this is another side of that intuition, right? Instead of it being kind of a learned intuition, like what Bennabelle Wynn offers in Spirit Keeper's Tarot, this is an intuition in sense of just a free-flowing kind of dreamscape. Like what comes to you? Are you open to receiving the messages as they come? This is one where, yeah, sure, people are more privy to this kind of intuition. Like some people are naturally inclined and naturally gifted into it. This was one that doesn't require, I think it does require like a lot of work. I don't want to say that it doesn't, but I think it's one that some people see as more accessible than perhaps like Bennabelle Wynn's interpretation of that. But I think both of them are decks that are third eye decks because they're decks that help us see. Whereas Bennabelle Wynn kind of helps us see kind of the theologies and the areas around us, this kind of helps us see the dreamscape, so to speak. All right, so we're gonna see, where am I at with that third eye? I love it when decks are consistent. And this is why I like to use 2 different tarot decks at once, because to see the similarities between the cards, it just makes me believe in tarot so much. This is one of the firm foundations of my practice, when you get to look at 2 cards and you're like, they're saying basically the same thing. So in terms of my third eye chakra, this makes a lot of sense to me. I am currently, as I've dubbed, I didn't dub it. I don't know who dubbed it. Please, if you were the one to say this on your channel, I think it was Carrie, like the concept of like wishes rest, I need to figure out who said it first so that I can credit them. But I am kind of in that space right now. Yeah, I think I'm in that space right now. Like, I'm still studying tarot, I'm still making some content, I'm still thinking, but I think that in general, I tend to be a lot more in alignment with like my root chakra, and definitely my sacral, and definitely my solar plexus, and I guess my heart, and I guess my throat too. I feel like the parts of that are associated with the body and kind of below, I tend to tap into a lot better because I'm more of an earth person. I have more earth in my chart than everything else. I think once we start getting into like card 6 and card 7, when we get into the third eye and then also the crown, sometimes it does become like a little bit over my head, so to speak. So I've been taking this bit of this rest to try to remain grounded, to remain feeling like I'm a part of kind of like the below. I don't think that sometimes that like, I don't think I sometimes like tap into the above. So this makes sense to me. We have the Hermit and we also have the 4 of Swords. So I don't even think I looked at these cards at all, other than to notice like we both have like this kind of moon image behind. I don't know what this is actually, but it kind of looks like a moon right here. And then we also have this person that's receiving this knowledge. It looks like she's receiving this knowledge. There's water right here. There's water right here. There's caves here. There's caves here. Y'all, it's basically the same card. It's Hermit and it's 4 of Swords. So I think that right now I am perhaps like going within, and I mean, from an optimistic point of view, I am going within and resting so that I'm able to tap into this. If I'm not able to, if I don't climb into the cave, I'm not able to get to this point. And so maybe it doesn't signify that like I'm on a rest, even though I kind of am on a rest. Maybe it's telling me that I need to rest so I can get to this point. No, I think my first gut instinct is right. Like, I am currently resting so that I can receive knowledge to be at the Hermit point. All right, beautiful. Look at this. I love when tarot does that. So that was Mystical Dream, Mystical Dreams, whatever. I'll leave a link in the description box below, as well as Spirit Keepers Tarot. And now we're into the last one, y'all. We have 2 Oracle decks for that one. Okay guys, so I moved this over here so that we're able to see it a little bit better. So Simply Han has this one listed for the crown chakra. As I am connected, I know. And this book has the connection to all, the energy of life that flows within and outside of the self, pure consciousness. I really like pure consciousness here. So when I think about the crown chakra, I think of what my husband and I kind of dubbed like the vibration. I don't know if he got that term from someone else or where we first heard that. We kind of magpie a lot of ideas, like not intentionally, but we just kind of do. But in terms of that, I think of the vibration. There's like a term too. I wish that I could remember the name of it, but I read the book Braiding Sweetgrass. If you really, really like nature books, you would love that book. But Robin Wall Kimmerer basically like states in there that there's a force that her particular indigenous group believes is like the life force that pushes up mushrooms overnight. I cannot remember the name of it, but I remember like that was my first time ever coming into contact with this concept of like this life force, and like it's different from like the sacral chakra. Like this is like the life force and the vibrations that kind of vibrate like within and without, like within and without. Like this is separate from like what we as species and creatures are doing together to create life. It's like this is the life that exists no matter what we do or what we don't do. So in that sense, it's kind of like the connection to the divine. So I know what decks I'm going to pick for this one. I definitely knew. And so I picked the Prophet Oracle for this one. Love, love, love this deck. This is also the other deck that I use at the start of my menstrual cycle. But Femme Erotiques is kind of like, what can I create? What can I bring to this month? This is kind of like my overall spiritual theme of the month. And I think it serves really well there. So you can kind of see with like the way that these individuals are kind of like outlined. To me, it reminds me of kind of like the force above, the force that's more. So this does kind of ring with that kind of vibration energy to me. And like, I want to live in alignment with these vibrations. The light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light. So it refers to kind of like these cosmic movements that are outside of yourself. The soul walks upon all paths. This is talking in general about just a general spiritual truth, a general spiritual idea. And I don't always understand the cards. Like this one, like the ocean is your God self, it remains forever undefiled. I got this card 2 months in a row and I did not understand it. I understood it more in the second month, but in the first month I was like, what the fuck does this card mean? And I think sometimes we feel that way, and I'm like, okay, well, if it's my monthly card, I need to figure out what it means. You know, maybe that's my message, maybe that's my goal, is to figure out what it means. But there are some cards that are a little bit above me, and I did kind of like reason with this one like a little bit. But essentially, there are cards that feel a little bit too kind of like you can touch them, and I get a sense of what they're saying, kind of like the vibrations that are around us. We can kind of touch these forces, but maybe it's not within our scheme of like human existence to kind of envelop ourselves into it. Maybe we're supposed to be familiar, but we're not supposed to be intimately familiar. I hope that makes sense. And if I have misspoken on this one, let me know. Like I said, I'm much more sure of the other ones, but it feels like that energy for me. The next one that I'm going to pick is Story Through Stones by Sandera Quackenbush. And this is the second edition with the good gilded edges. It's just really beautiful. So I'm picking this one because when I consulted with my husband about this particular tag, he mentioned to me that people bring up ancestors when they talk about the crown chakra, because the ancestors are part of that vibration that essentially helps remind people that they're more than just themselves. And I do actually believe that. That's part of my spiritual path, is that the ancestors are still around and that the energy still pulses. You know, it has to go somewhere. It's not like energy dies or if it just goes away. And of course, some of it is converted into the soil, rather into our castic, our being cremated, things like that. But like, where does the spiritual energy go? That has to go somewhere. And so I do think that it's still around us, and it still kind of envelops us and kind of encompasses us and things like that. This deck reminds me of those ancestors, because this deck was built in legacy in honor of Sandera's dad, who spent his entire life looking for these stones as a park ranger, and then he passed these stones that told stories to Sandera, who then turned into an oracle deck to share to other people. And so it reminds me of that ancestral linkage. This is also a deck I use to communicate with my grandfather, which is something I've waxed poetic about on this channel all the time. But it is one that, to me, the stones are the true reminder of that. So while I think that it's kind of similar to that groundedness, right? Like, I have a hard time differentiating, and maybe it's because like the chakras aren't supposed to exist. It's like these separate spaces. Maybe they are supposed to exist, maybe not necessarily on a spectrum, but in a circle. This definitely feels as well as a bit like root to me. So while the prophet is kind of above me in a sense of like, sometimes I don't understand its messaging, this is like the energy of life that flows within and outside of myself. Like, I can feel this energy. Just like I can feel the prophet, I can feel this. There's something deeper, there's something energetic about it. There's a vibration here, and these stones hold those vibrations and have for millions and millions of years. So if I butchered this, I'm sorry, but it's kind of my relationship of where it stands. And I think that's the best part about TarotTube, is I think we can talk about those relationships and like talk about what things mean to us. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and pull. Okay, here are my cards for it. Okay, so I'm gonna start with this one first. Guys, I'm sorry I keep bumping my desk. I think it's just because I'm so enthusiastic about this topic. I got a new computer chair and like I'm sitting on a different level, so I'm sorry if it's taking you out of the experience, because I don't mean to shake my desk. So this one is the first one I want to talk about. This is from the Prophet. It's sing and dance together and be joyous. I mean, it makes sense to me, y'all. It does. Like, I feel like this is how I understand this energy. And like, please give me more information. I will probably end this video and do a little bit more research on what the crown chakra is, but I think that to me it represents that interconnectedness, right? Whereas the third eye kind of represents like our personal intuition, the crown chakra kind of represents the interconnectedness, and that is definitely reflected by the words like together. And that's part of who we are. It's like every single day I wake up and I realize that I'm interconnected with everything that's around me. But it's these relationships in particular that I have with others and that I have with other beings and other species and with the land that remind me of that interconnectedness and remind me of that vibration. And I think in a way, like, this is a deck that is purely intuitive. There's no guide words, which is particularly why I wanted to use it for this prompt. I think in a way, that interconnectedness does serve as kind of a guiding light to me. So we have this bit of a lighthouse here in the background, and we have this beautiful kind of sun that is kind of lighting its way. And I think that's what it is, right? Because I had spoken before about the vibrations kind of feeling like that sunlight to me. That's always kind of what it feels like. And maybe that's why the Hermit had that round shape in the background. I interpreted it earlier as like the moon for the third eye, but maybe it's also the sun. But there's kind of like this celestial being in the sky that is pulsing with those vibrations, and our relationships and our experiences with other people, that relationship helps to be our guiding light moving forward. Yep, I'm good with that. All right, so that was a long video. And I think you knew that because you clicked on the video. So if you made it through this whole thing with me, y'all, thank you. And if I messed up and I said something that was like egregiously wrong, please let me know. Like, I would love to be corrected because I don't want to be here on YouTube and sound like an idiot. So please let me know. I am playing with these ideas and kind of working within systems, but I am no means an expert. I am just here to represent what I know and my knowledge, my own personal experiences. But if I am like egregiously in the wrong, let me know. So I thank y'all so much for being here. Once again, I'm going to end my video by thanking you. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love this space. I love inhabiting this space. Like, it really is such a healing part of this journey for me that I get to share this space with y'all. So once again, thank you, and I can't wait to see y'all next time.